Every once in a while, I like to taxi off the usual runway of kit building and try a slightly different flight path. It still circles back to my main obsession, aircraft, but 3D printed and 4D models are a kind of their own airspace altogether. And since I'm already juggling a double build right now, I figured this time I'd take the path of least turbulence. So, like any responsible modeler on final approach to a new distraction, I went browsing on Amazon. Somewhere in the endless scroll, I spotted this 3D printed model by J Art. At first glance, it looked a lot like a Mirage 2000, and honestly, I thought that looks accurate enough. A little primer, a little paint, and we could have ourselves an Indian Air Force Mirage 2000. So, without much delay, I placed the order. Total damage to the wallet, 900 rupees. Now here's where things really took off. The model arrived in just 2 days, and the moment I opened the package, boom! Pleasant surprise on the runway. It was already pre-painted in Indian Air Force colors. So not only was my excitement cleared for takeoff, but my workload also got a nice little reduction in drag. Assembly itself was pretty smooth flying too. There were 8 parts in total, 6 for the aircraft and 2 for the stand, and everything fit together surprisingly well. The fuselage halves locked in with these snug little Lego style pins. And after attaching the wings and the stand, the aircraft was basically ready for departure. Or so I thought. Because while the camouflage was there, the markings were missing. No roundels, no fin flashes. Basically, the poor Mirage was flying incognito. But there was one more plot twist. I measured the fuselage and it came out to 16.5 centimeters, which means this is actually closer to a 1 by 100 scale model, not 1 by 72 like the Amazon listing claimed. But instead of returning it then, I decided to treat it as a skill building exercise. So I resized the missiles and drop tanks to 1 by 100 scale and got to work. And of course, instead of taking the easy route, my brain decided to enter full afterburner mode and make life unnecessarily complicated. So yes, this build is about to get a little more armed and a little more detailed. I decided to scratch build 4 Matra mica missiles, 2 drop tanks, and the hardpoints to carry them all, because apparently I don't believe in simple straightforward aircraft. Now, the Mirage 2000 usually carries 2 types of drop tanks under the wings, the sleek supersonic tanks and the standard conformal ones. Since the conformal tanks are the more common fit on Indian Mirages, I decided to go with those, mainly because if I'm going to make my life difficult, I should at least do it accurately. So with that, let's get this build airborne. So first, I cut out the correct side and top profiles of the drop tank. To get the thickness right, I glued together a few pieces of balsa wood, drew the tank shape over the bundle, and then got to work cutting, shaping, and sanding it down until it looked the part. Or at least until it stopped looking like a badly carved potato. Once I was happy with the overall shape, or maybe just emotionally exhausted enough to accept it, I moved on to building the hardpoint that the tank would be mounted on. For this, I used 2mm sunboard, or as the folks in the US and UK call it, foam board or foam core, because apparently one material needs 3 different identities depending on which side of the planet you're living on. And because one self-inflicted challenge clearly wasn't enough, I had to repeat the whole process for the second tank as well. I then used my standard cyanoacrylate glue to attach the hardpoint to the tank, which worked wonderfully and only almost turned my fingers into part of the model. After that, it was time to move on to the Matra mica missiles. For the missile bodies, I used thin toothpicks, which is a sentence that sounds deeply reassuring when building advanced air-to-air weaponry. For the wings of the missiles, I used stretch sprue, which basically means heating up a piece of sprue until it just starts to soften, then pulling it slowly and steadily until you get the thickness you want. It's one of those techniques that feels like equal parts modeling and black magic. For the movable fins at the rear end of the missile, I used small pieces of plastic card, cut them to shape and glued them onto the back of the missile. Or, if we're being brutally honest, onto the back of a very ambitious toothpick. But no, let's stay professional. Missile. For the hard points, I once again used 2mm sunboard and cut out mounts for all 4 missiles. Now, the hard points for the missiles under the wings are different from the ones under the fuselage, because apparently even miniature missiles demand custom seating arrangements. So I cut and shaped each one accordingly until they matched the layout I was aiming for. Finally, I painted the drop tanks and missiles off camera, keeping 2 missiles white and the other 2 grey, partly for accuracy and partly because the underside of the Mirage was starting to look like it needed a little personality. The decals, roundels, fin flashes and serial numbers were all printed by me. And this is where things got mildly irritating because I discovered they didn't want to stick properly to the surface of the model. So I had to apply glue underneath each decal to make it conform and stay in place. Slightly cursed but effective. The rest of the decal process was fairly standard. So finally, it was time to bring everything together. Fit the drop tanks, attach the missiles, and connect all the remaining parts of the aircraft. Now at this point, I'd like to mention that the fuselage halves needed some glue in order to stick them together tightly enough because it did have a gap. The scratch-built under fuselage hardpoints were then aligned under the fuselage and they came out surprisingly well. Amazingly, after all that effort, the final assembly only took about 15 minutes, which is always funny in model making. Spend hours scratch building tiny weapons, then finish the whole thing in the time it takes to make tea. Oh, and I nearly forgot. The Indian Air Force Mirages also carry a refueling probe, which I scratch built again off camera using some sprue and bits of plastic, and then painted it black. So that was effectively the final step of the build, because apparently this project wasn't going to let me have anything in stock. So here it is on the rotating disc of glory, a fully loaded, ready to strike Mirage 2000 of the Indian Air Force. And honestly, seeing it all come together like this does make the extra effort feel worth it. Now, my 2 cents. For 900 rupees, this is a pretty expensive model for what you get, especially considering it comes with no markings and no weapons. The basic assembly takes about 5 minutes flat after unboxing. And sure, it's got its play value if you're a kid that enjoys flying things around the room dramatically. But from a serious modeler's perspective, it definitely needs extra work before it looks convincing enough to sit proudly on the shelf as an Indian Air Force aircraft. So would I say it's worth 900 rupees? Honestly, not really. At least not out of the box. But at the same time, there isn't really anything else like this readily available in the market right now. So if you just want a quick build Mirage that looks nice on the shelf and gives you a fun little project to mess around with, then yeah, it's an okay buy. Just don't expect Tamiya level precision from such a kit. So if you've stayed with me this far in the video, do consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. And do share your comments as to whether you would like to buy such a kit just for the sake of enjoyment, or would you rather not prefer spending that much amount of money. Thanks for watching. Swing Wing Sing signing off. I'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye, take care.